Alright everyone, Project Veritas has another release, link in the description as always to what's been posted there. To a second Bernie Sanders staffer who has, said weird shit, violent things about wanting to shoot people, praising gulags and re-education camps, the whole commie 9 yards. You've got to understand, sometimes people don't like to admit this, but you've got to understand there are still people in the world that are commies, and they're almost invariably like this. On the surface, they'll say, no, I just want free shit. But if you really get them into a conversation, give them a couple of beers, they all seem to turn into tankies. They all seem to turn into Stalin worshippers. You realize that there's a reason for this, correct? If you have that sort of fanatic ideology, the only way to impose it and to impose yourself on other people, the only way for the dross of society to take hold is through force, because otherwise they don't have the capability. That requires people who are cunning and opportunistic, like commie leaders tend to be, to usurp things and then usually purge everyone who's actually worth anything. This is how a communist society is incepted. And then, of course, because you've killed everyone who's hardworking and decent and honest, typically it devolves into low-level mob rule under the party structure, and then you get corruption that seeps in more and more at every level and slowly collapses the system. Then, after it collapses, the commies that survive can blame the CIA for their own fucking problems. This is probably much more common than a few staffers. That's the problem. And apparently this dude deleted his account. And a bunch of field managers and organizers in Iowa, and this I think was in South Carolina, so keep that in mind. A bunch of his campaign managers in the most important state, which is Iowa, especially for Sanders, Iowa is extremely important. Because if he gets a tailwind from winning there, he can definitely go into New Hampshire, no problem, and win it. He'll have the first two. He begins to look a lot more viable than Bernie Sanders, the distant second-place finisher, which is what he would be right now, especially if he loses Iowa. I think that if Biden manages to snatch Iowa, he may very well eke out a win in New Hampshire, too. In which case, he runs the field, he becomes the nominee. Sanders probably needs Iowa. And he definitely needs New Hampshire. The problem is that the latter could be hazarded by the first. But it seems that a lot of his campaign staff in Iowa have locked down their online presences, deleting accounts, locking their Twitter pages, going silent. That should be, coordination between these people through Twitter is a little bit easier than through other methods. Twitter, for all of the faults of the platform, it is a really good direct messaging machine. It's better than Facebook at this point. Facebook is all sorts of wonky and fucked up. And insofar as these people have other pages on other sites, a lot of them are being locked down too. So it's obvious that the campaign itself, Sanders has not responded on a national level to this problem, which is you've got people in your campaign saying violent things, saying they want to burn media figures in the street, bring back re-education camps, kill people, mass executions and gulags. I'm thinking to myself again, the legacy media would crucify Donald Trump if some of his campaign staff were saying similar things. Years and years of nonstop high-level scrutiny of everyone associated with Trump, including people that aren't on his payroll, people who just simply support him, hasn't turned up this kind of rhetoric. The Bernie Sanders campaign has several campaign organizers and field managers who are saying basically the same crazy thing, including violence against the so-called journos of the legacy media, which you don't hear from Trump's fans. Trump's fans say they don't trust the legacy media. Oh my God, attack on the freedom of the press. Bernie Sanders' campaign organizer says throw him in gulags. Oh, nothing. Pure silence. Nobody says a goddamn word. The difference is astounding and appalling. The level of yellow journalism, hackery, and selective reporting that we're seeing from the legacy media is really the only thing that makes this interesting. I can understand the basic premise of a mid-level manager or organizer being a fruitcake and saying violent things, getting a DUI or whatever. I'm sure there are some questionable characters on other campaigns too, except for Klobuchar's campaign, because there it's the candidate who's violent. She apparently, when she gets mad, she throws things at people. Which, by the way, it's funny to see the New York Times endorse somebody with that kind of character while saying that Trump is off hinge. You've got this situation where, okay, I can accept that. When you get tens of thousands of people volunteering for you, thousands of people working directly on your payroll, some of them will be bad eggs. Yeah, there's probably a murder of an ex-con there or two. But the difference in reporting is astonishing to me. It's funny when Bernie bros claim that Bernie Sanders is mistreated by the media. That's funny. This happens, nobody reports on it. Not a single goddamn credible news agency has bothered to report it. And I use credible slightly tongue-in-cheek there, of course. Not a single mainline group other than Politico reported like on the fact that he had in a moment of extreme stupidity talked about wanting to ban vaping. Whoa, I think they're hurting people. We should just ban them outright. He showed his inner commie that day. Not a single mainline news site reported on it except for Politico. It was the only resource. When I looked it up days later, Bernie Sanders vaping, Google aggregation, only one result from any mainline site, which was Politico. Then there were a couple of places nobody cares about on the far right where it's like, oh yeah, I'm sure that you got a lot of Bernie bros watching Breitbart. No, not really. But the legacy media made it front page news for days when Trump was talking about regulating vaping. Oh my God, Trump the authoritarian. Trump doesn't understand. Vaping is actually to quit smoking. Did any of these groups jump down Bernie Sanders' throat and say, look, yet another outdated old dude who doesn't understand the issue, talking through his ass? Not a single goddamn one. And not a single one of them will talk about the Veritas releases. The legacy media in 2016 covered Veritas quite frequently. Now they've realized, oh shit, these people will get mad at us, and if they become the nominee, they'll blackball us from interviews and stuff. They're worried about their bottom line, so they don't want to challenge Sanders. Now, if it were a release about Yang or Klobuchar or something, I think that they would probably report on it. The irony is that the fact that he's one of the main candidates is protecting him from being held to the same scrutiny Trump is. That's what I get from it. You got staffers and organizers talking about throwing Trump fans in gulags and stuff. Can you imagine if a Trump campaign field manager or a Trump organizer in South Carolina or something were to be caught on record by a sting operation by the Young Turks or Right Wing Watch or something saying similar comparable things? Oh, well, the concentration camp wasn't that too bad. Yeah, maybe we should have those for Obama fans. Can you fucking imagine what would happen if something comparable had been said? It would be front page news for weeks. Trump would get beaten over the head with it. Everybody and their mother would be calling on him to disavow, dissociate, and distance himself from that rhetoric and then throw money to the SPLC or something. But you can get the same thing said about this fucking commie, basically, Bernie Sanders. I'm just going to start calling him a commie because, you know, fuck the left. Bernie Sanders, his people are saying this. Nobody cares. Oh, it doesn't matter. Say the Bernie bros, well, it doesn't really matter. At first they tried to cast the first dude off as just a volunteer before realizing he was paid by the campaign. He was one of their main Iowa organizers on the field. Apparently he's still working for the campaign. Why am I not surprised? Could it be because nobody's putting any pressure on him from the legacy media? Bernie Sanders fans, for all their bravado about, oh, the legacy media, the corporate media hates Bernie. No, they don't. And you know it, which is why none of you are putting pressure on him either. There's a reason for that. That's about all. Peace out.